My name is Serena Vance. I'm 45 years old, and 20 years ago, I gave birth to a secret. Not the kind you tell in hushed tones, but the kind you nurture and let grow, watching it twist the lives of those who thought they were clever enough to wound you. I was 25 the year I built the Vance Group, my architecture and design firm. It was built on trust, the kind I thought I shared with Juliana Rhodes, my best friend since university. We were inseparable. We were going to conquer Seattle's skyline together. I owned 100% of the firm, but I had promised Juliana a significant partnership stake once she and her husband, Marcus, got their failing investment fund stabilized. But Juliana and Marcus were not stabilizing. They were sinking. They needed my firm's assets, the multi-million-dollar portfolio and the reputation I had built. They needed a controlling stake. Specifically, the 60% share of the firm's equity they knew would give them immediate leverage. And then came the twist of fate they weaponized. Juliana discovered she could never conceive. I, however, was pregnant with my first child. This is where their depravity began its blueprint. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to erase me from the future and replace me entirely. At the time of my daughter's birth, Juliana and Marcus had devised a sickening plot. They would switch our babies in the hospital nursery. They would raise my child as their own, the perfect, genetically superior heir to my money, while I would be left raising their baby. A constant, unwanted reminder of my failure. After 20 years, they would use fraudulent DNA evidence to break the news. The child I raised was theirs. The firm's 60% shares would be signed over to their daughter, my biological child. And I would be left shattered, empty-handed, and childless. They thought they were setting a trap. They were simply giving me a very long, very sharp knife. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where family felt like the enemy, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe that the only way to beat a snake is to let it bite its own tail, subscribe to Minister of Revenge. Before I tell you about the night everything changed, you need to understand how deep this friendship ran. Juliana and I met during our freshman year at the University of Washington. She was studying business, I was in architecture. We bonded over late-night study sessions, shared dreams of building something meaningful, and a mutual disdain for the old boys club that dominated Seattle's commercial landscape. By the time we graduated, we had a plan. I would start the design firm, she would handle the business development side. We shook hands over coffee at the original Starbucks, promising each other we'd never let money or men come between us. God, we were naive. The firm took off faster than either of us expected. My designs caught the attention of several tech companies looking to build sleek, modern headquarters. Within 3 years, the Vance Group had a staff of 12 and a waiting list of clients. Juliana was instrumental in those early days, connecting me with investors, negotiating contracts, throwing networking events where I could barely force myself to smile. But then she met Marcus Rhodes at one of those events. He was handsome in that polished corporate way, perfect teeth, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that comes from generational wealth. He swept Juliana off her feet with private jets and weekend trips to Vancouver. They were married within 6 months. I was her maid of honor. I gave a toast about friendship lasting forever. Marcus clinked his glass against mine and said, "To partnerships that make us all richer." Everyone laughed. I should have heard the warning. Marcus's investment fund was supposed to be the next big thing. He pitched it as a boutique operation focusing on Pacific Northwest startups. Juliana quit her role at my firm to help him run it, promising she'd come back once they got it established. I supported her decision. That's what friends do, right? But within a year, whispers started. Bad investments, aggressive tactics, clients pulling out. Marcus would show up at my office sometimes, his smile a little too tight, asking casual questions about the Vance Group's quarterly earnings, our client retention rates, our asset valuations. I chalked it up to professional curiosity. Then came the fertility treatments. Juliana confided in me over wine one evening, tears streaming down her face. They'd been trying for 2 years. Every month was heartbreak. The doctors had finally delivered the crushing news. She would never carry a child. Marcus, she said, was devastated. His family expected an heir. She felt like she was failing him. I held her that night while she sobbed, I told her there were other options: adoption, surrogacy. She nodded, but something in her eyes looked hollow, distant. I didn't recognize it then as the beginning of her hatred toward me, because 2 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. I hadn't been planning it. The father was a brief relationship with a colleague that ended amicably when he took a position in Vancouver. When I told Juliana, I expected her to be happy for me, or at least supportive. Instead, she went very quiet. Her smile was thin, forced. "How wonderful for you," she said, her voice flat. "You always did have everything work out perfectly." I tried to reassure her, to tell her this didn't change anything between us. But from that moment, I felt the frost. She stopped returning my calls as quickly. When we did meet, conversations were strained, punctuated by long silences, and her eyes constantly drifting to my growing belly. Marcus's behavior became stranger too. He started asking about my will, about succession planning for the firm. "Just thinking ahead," he'd say with that shark smile. "You're going to be a mother now. You need to protect your assets for your child." I should have seen it coming, but I was exhausted, hormonal, excited, and terrified about impending motherhood. I missed the signs. It wasn't until 3 weeks before my due date that I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I had stopped by Juliana's house to drop off some baby clothes she'd offered to lend me. The front door was unlocked, and I walked in calling her name. No response. I heard voices from Marcus's study, low, intense. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but my name stopped me cold. "When Serena's baby is born," Marcus was saying, "the switch has to happen within the first 48 hours. Hospital security gets tighter after that." My blood turned to ice. "I still don't know if I can do it." Juliana's voice, trembling. "What if someone sees? What if—" "No one will see. You'll go in during the night shift change. The nurse I paid off will make sure the nursery is clear for exactly 7 minutes. That's all you need. Switch the ankle and wristbands, swap the cribs. Serena will take our baby home. We'll take hers. And then we wait. We raise her biological daughter. Give her everything: the best schools, connections, opportunities. We make sure Serena bonds with our child. Pours everything into her. 20 years, Jules. That's how long we wait." "Why 20 years?" "Because that's when Serena has already signed over the 60% controlling stake to her daughter, to our biological child that she raised. Then we reveal the truth, DNA evidence, the whole thing. The courts will have to recognize that the shares legally belong to us through our biological heir. Serena loses her company, her daughter, everything, and we get it all." Juliana laughed then, a sound I'd never heard from her before, bitter, cruel. "She'll be destroyed, completely broken." "That's the point," Marcus said coldly. "She has everything we should have. Her perfect firm, her perfect pregnancy, her perfect life. It's time for her to lose." I backed out of that house so quietly I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time I reached my apartment, one thought had crystallized with perfect clarity. I wasn't going to stop them. I was going to let them do it, and then I was going to countermove in a way they would never see coming. The birth was chaotic. Elara arrived early, 2 weeks before my due date, in an emergency C-section that plunged me into a haze of exhaustion and pain meds. I barely remember the nurses placing her in my arms, a tiny, perfect bundle with my eyes and my grandmother's chin. But I stayed conscious through the fog. I had to, because I knew Juliana would be coming. She'd sent flowers to my room within an hour of the birth, white roses. My favorite. The card read, "Congratulations, darling, can't wait to meet her. Love always, Jay." The nurses had cooed over her thoughtfulness. I'd stared at those roses until they blurred, knowing each petal was a lie. Later that night, unable to sleep despite the surgery and the overwhelming anxiety of new motherhood, I forced myself to walk to the nursery window. Every step sent pain shooting through my abdomen, but I gritted my teeth and kept moving. The room was dim, quiet. Only 2 babies remained in the nursery. Most had been taken to their mothers' rooms for the night. And then I saw her, Juliana, sneaking in through a utility door, her face a mask of frantic, sweating determination. She was wearing scrubs, a visitor's badge. Her hair tucked under a surgical cap. She shouldn't have been there. She was supposed to be states away at a fake business conference, her alibi carefully constructed. I watched, frozen in horror behind the glass, my body pressed against the wall to stay out of sight. I watched as she located my baby, my Ilara, and another tiny girl in a neighboring crib with a card that read, "Baby Girl Rhodes." So they'd done it. They'd arranged for another woman to give birth here, around the same time as me, to provide their biological child for the swap. The planning was meticulous, sociopathic. Juliana worked quickly, her hands trembling but efficient. She swapped the identification tags, the plastic ankle bands, the wristbands, the crib cards. She pressed my baby into the crib bearing the Rhodes name tag, and placed the other baby in the crib bearing mine. Then she crept out, disappearing into the cold Seattle night. The betrayal was total. It was clinical. It was murder of the soul. I stumbled back to my room, adrenaline overriding the anesthesia. My mind raced through options. I could call security. I could call the police. I could scream for the nurses. But I stopped myself, because if I exposed her now, what would happen? She and Marcus would deny everything. They had money, lawyers, connections. They'd already planted seeds of doubt about my mental state. I'd heard Marcus tell the nurses I was high-strung and prone to anxiety. They'd paint me as a paranoid new mother, unhinged by hormones and trauma. And even if I could prove it, what then? A messy court battle that might take years. Media attention that would destroy my firm. And worst of all, they might win. They might actually be allowed to keep my baby, or force some joint custody nightmare. No, I had heard their plan. I knew their timeline. And in that moment, lying in that hospital bed with pain radiating through my body, I knew the best justice wasn't exposure, it was patience. I would let them think they'd succeeded. I would let them execute their plan for 20 years. But I would change one crucial variable. I would switch the babies back. I waited until the early hours of dawn, when the shift change was complete and the floor was quiet. I claimed to need to feed my baby, pushing through the pain to walk back to that nursery. The nurse on duty barely glanced up from her computer. The baby they thought was mine, the one they intended for me to raise. The Rhodes child was beautiful. Dark curls, delicate features. She was innocent in all of this, a pawn in her biological parents' sick game. I looked at the crib where Juliana had placed the other baby. My baby. Ilara. She had my nose, my coloring. Any genetic testing in the future would show she was mine because she was. With hands that steadied despite my racing heart, I checked the identification bands. One on the wrist, one on the ankle. I swapped them back. My baby was back in the crib with my name. Their baby, the one they thought was mine, was back in the crib with the Rhodes name. I walked out of that hospital room, holding my child, Ilara, my heart pounding with triumph, fear, and a new, terrible knowledge. I was going to raise my daughter, and I was going to watch Juliana and Marcus execute their vile plan not on me, but on the daughter they didn't know was their own. The next morning, they came to visit. Juliana brought more flowers, her face a mask of concern and joy. She held my hand and gazed at Ilara with what looked like genuine affection. She's perfect, Serena. Absolutely perfect. Marcus stood by the window, his expression unreadable. But I saw the way his eyes kept darting to the baby in my arms. Calculating. Assessing. Have you thought about godparents? Juliana asked, her voice honey-sweet. Marcus and I would be honored. Of course, I said, smiling through the morphine haze. I can't think of anyone I'd trust more. The lie tasted like ash. But it was necessary. Because for the next 20 years, I would need to keep them close, keep them confident, keep them believing their plan was working perfectly. What they didn't know was that with every birthday party they attended, every school event they showed up to, every gift they gave my daughter, they were deepening their own eventual devastation. For 20 years, I lived the lie. And let me tell you, it nearly killed me 100 times over. I watched my sweet, brilliant daughter, Ilara, grow up, shielded from the venom of her supposed aunt and uncle, who believed she was their biological niece. They treated her like visiting royalty, showering her with expensive gifts, taking her on trips, praising every accomplishment. Meanwhile, Juliana and Marcus raised Chloe. Beautiful, sensitive Chloe, their biological daughter, the child they believed was mine. And because they believed Chloe was my daughter, the child of the woman they hated and saw as weak, they were determined to maltreat her. Not physically, but systematically. Psychologically, they were cold, overly critical, and emotionally manipulative. They wanted to ensure that the child they thought I was raising was constantly told she was unworthy, disruptive, and incapable of true success, hoping to break my spirit through her failure. I watched Juliana publicly criticize Chloe at family gatherings. "Your grades are mediocre at best, Chloe. I don't know where you get this lack of ambition." The girl was 13, getting A's and B's in challenging courses. But Juliana would compare her to Alara. "Now, Alara got a 4 this semester. That's what real dedication looks like." I watched Marcus freeze Chloe out of conversations, never asking about her interests, dismissing her accomplishments as participation trophy nonsense. When Chloe made the honor roll, he said, "Well, the standards have certainly dropped since my day." They steered her away from challenging fields, pushing her towards soft arts and humanities, subjects they could more easily diminish. "You're not really a math person, are you, Chloe?" Juliana would say with false sympathy. "Best to stick with what comes naturally, which isn't much." Meanwhile, they fawned over Alara. They paid for summer enrichment programs, offered to fund her college completely, constantly told her how brilliant and special she was. They were priming her, grooming her to love them more than she loved me, ensuring that when the truth came out, she would choose them over her adoptive mother. Every single time I witnessed this, my stomach twisted into knots. There were nights I couldn't sleep, lying awake knowing that Chloe was suffering under the cruelty of her own biological parents, and my silence was allowing it to continue. I wanted to intervene so badly it physically hurt. I wanted to scream at them, to tell Chloe the truth, to end the charade. But I couldn't, because the moment I interfered, I would reveal my knowledge and sacrifice the ultimate moment of justice. So instead, I did what I could quietly. I made sure Alara spent time with Chloe, treated her like a sister, showed her kindness. I praised Chloe's artwork, her writing, her gentle nature. I told her she was smart, capable, worthy, trying to counteract the poison her parents fed her daily. Chloe would look at me sometimes with these heartbreaking, grateful eyes, and I could see her confusion. Why was her parents' friend kinder to her than her own mother and father? "You're the only adult who actually listens to me, Miss Vance," she told me once when she was 16. Sitting in my kitchen while waiting for Alara, my parents. They don't even try to hide that they're disappointed in me. I'd held her hand across the table, my throat tight. "You are extraordinary, Chloe. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise. Your parents..." I'd stopped myself. "Some people can't see what's right in front of them. That's their failing, not yours." She'd cried then, and I'd held her while she sobbed. This beautiful girl who'd been systematically destroyed by the people who should have loved her most. And I'd felt like a monster for letting it continue. But I told myself, the truth would vindicate her. When Juliana and Marcus's plan unraveled, Chloe would finally understand that their cruelty had nothing to do with her worth. She would see that she was their biological daughter, that their treatment of her was based on a lie, that she was perfect exactly as she was. I held onto that hope like a lifeline. Meanwhile, I built my firm into an empire. The Vance Group became a dominant force in Pacific Northwest architecture, expanding to Portland and Vancouver, employing over 100 people. I won awards. I sat on boards. I made sure every financial move was documented, every asset accounted for. And I watched Juliana and Marcus's investment fund continue to fail. They kept up appearances, but I knew the truth. They were hemorrhaging money, cycling through investors, barely staying afloat. They needed my firm more desperately than ever. Marcus started bringing it up more frequently. "You really should think about succession planning, Serena. Ilara's going to need a clear path to ownership. We'd be happy to help facilitate the transition. When she's 20, I'd say calmly. That's when I'll transfer the controlling interest. 20 seems arbitrary," he'd push. "It's when my grandmother transferred her estate to my mother," I'd reply smoothly. "Family tradition." He'd smile that predatory smile. "Family tradition. I like that." What he didn't know was that every conversation was recorded, every email saved, every text message archived. My attorney, Dean Coleman, had been documenting everything for years, building a file that would be ironclad when the time came. Elara thrived. She inherited my sharp mind and passion for design, and was accepted to UW's architecture program with full honors. She was kind, curious, driven, everything I'd hoped she would be, and she loved me fiercely, no matter how much Juliana and Marcus tried to wedge themselves between us. "Why are Uncle Marcus and Aunt Juliana so weird about Chloe?" she asked me once when she was 17. "They're so nice to me, but they're awful to her. She's their daughter. Some people don't know how to love the gifts they've been given," I'd said carefully. "They take them for granted." "Well, it's messed up," Elara had declared. "Chloe's amazing. If I were her mom, I'd be so proud." My heart had cracked a little more that day. And through it all, I waited. 20 years. That was their timeline, and I would honor it. Because the longer the deception ran, the more devastating the truth would be. The trap was finally set for Elara's 20th birthday, the deadline they had established in their overheard plot 2 decades earlier. Everything had been building to this moment. I had been coached by Dean Coleman, who understood the nature of quiet war. My financial reports were meticulously structured to show that a transfer of 60% controlling interest in the Vance Group to Elara was imminent, a necessary step in the inheritance planning process. The paperwork was ready. The board had been notified. Everything appeared to be proceeding exactly as Juliana and Marcus had planned all those years ago. 3 days before Elara's birthday, Juliana called me. Her voice was different, higher, tighter, vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Serena, darling, I need to talk to you about something important." "Of course," I said. Sitting in my study, Dean on speakerphone but muted. "What is it?" "It's about Elara. And Chloe. And, well, this is difficult. But there's something Marcus and I discovered that you need to know." "I'm listening." I kept my voice neutral. "We've been having some genetic testing done, you know, family medical history stuff, and something strange came up, inconsistencies in Chloe's DNA compared to ours." "That's odd," I said flatly. "Yes, very odd." So we did more testing, including some samples from old baby clothes, medical records from the hospital where she was born. And, Serena, she paused for dramatic effect, "we think there was a switch. At the hospital, 20 years ago." The silence stretched. I counted 3 heartbeats. "What are you saying, Juliana?" "I'm saying that we believe Chloe is your biological daughter, and Elara is ours." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. "That's insane," I finally said, letting my voice crack slightly. "That's absolutely insane. I know it sounds crazy, but the DNA doesn't lie. Marcus is at the lab right now getting the final confirmation. We'll have the official report by tonight." "And then what?" I asked, my tone hardening. "What exactly do you plan to do with this information?" "Well," her voice turned sharp, the false sympathy stripped away. "Legally, this changes everything. The shares you were planning to transfer to Elara, they should rightfully go to our biological daughter. And Chloe, I'm sorry, Serena, but you'll need to address custody arrangements for our child that you've been raising." There it was. 20 years of planning, distilled into one moment of triumphant cruelty. "You want my company," I said quietly. "I want what's rightfully ours," she corrected. "You've done well, Serena, truly. But the genetics don't lie. Elara is a Rhodes. The firm should go to a Rhodes." I took a slow breath. "And you've waited 20 years to tell me this." "We just found out." She lied smoothly. "Marcus discovered the inconsistencies last month, during routine medical testing. We've been verifying everything before bringing it to you. We didn't want to cause unnecessary pain." "How considerate," I said, acid in my tone. "Serena, I know this is a shock, but we need to handle this properly. Can you meet us at the firm's boardroom tomorrow evening? Bring your attorney. We'll bring ours and the DNA evidence. We can settle this civilly, for the girl's sake." "For the girl's sake," I repeated. "Exactly. This doesn't have to be ugly." I looked out at the Seattle rain. The city I'd built my empire in. The skyline dotted with buildings I'd designed. Tomorrow evening. 6 o'clock. Perfect. And Serena, I really am sorry it came to this. If you just, well, water under the bridge now. She hung up, I sat in silence for a moment before unmuting Dean. You got all that? I asked. Every word, he confirmed. They're actually doing it. After 20 years, they're actually executing the plan. Of course they are, I said calmly. They've been planning this since before Elara was born. They're not going to stop now. Are you ready for tomorrow? I smiled. A cold, sharp thing. I've been ready for 20 years. The next evening, I arrived at the Vance Group's headquarters at 5:45 p.m. The building was one of my early designs, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, a lobby that felt both professional and welcoming. I'd built this with my own hands, my own vision. No one was taking it from me. Dean met me in the lobby, his expression grave. They're already here. Brought their attorney, Thomas Werner. He's aggressive, expensive. Good, I said. Let him waste his client's money. We rode the elevator to the top-floor boardroom in silence. The doors opened onto a sleek corridor, walls lined with awards and magazine covers featuring my work. Every step was a reminder of what I'd built, what I'd earned. Juliana and Marcus stood by the windows, their backs to me. Juliana wore an expensive suit, her hair perfectly styled. Marcus was on his phone, barking orders at someone. They turned when I entered, and for a moment, I saw genuine shock on their faces. I looked good. I'd made sure of it. Hair styled, makeup flawless, wearing a custom suit that cost more than their monthly mortgage. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who'd built an empire and wasn't going down without a fight. Serena, Juliana breathed. You look, well. Why wouldn't I? I asked coolly, taking my seat at the head of the table. Shall we begin? Their attorney Werner cleared his throat. He was exactly what I expected, silver-haired, expensive watch, the kind of lawyer who made his living destroying people. Miss Vance, thank you for meeting with us. I know this situation is unusual. Unusual, I repeated. That's one word for it. My clients have brought to light some information regarding the parentage of your daughter, Elara Vance, and their daughter, Chloe Rhodes. DNA evidence suggests that a switch occurred at the hospital 20 years ago, resulting in each of you raising the other's biological child. I stared at him. That's quite an accusation. He slid a folder across the table. The evidence is conclusive. We have DNA reports from 3 separate labs, all confirming the same results. Elara Vance is the biological daughter of Juliana and Marcus Rhodes. Chloe Rhodes is your biological daughter. I opened the folder slowly, scanning the documents. They looked official, detailed, expensive. But I'd expected that. They'd had 20 years to prepare this performance. These results are from recent testing, I observed. Blood draws from last month. Correct, Werner confirmed. And you're bringing this to me now because? Marcus leaned forward, his voice tight with false sympathy. Because it's time for the truth, Serena. Those girls deserve to know who their real parents are. And legally this changes everything regarding the inheritance you were planning to transfer. Ah, I said softly. There it is. Juliana's eyes flashed. Don't make this about money, Serena. This is about our daughter. About correcting a mistake that's haunted us for 2 decades. A mistake, I echoed. Is that what we're calling it? The hospital's negligence resulted in... Stop. I cut her off. Just stop. We both know that's not what happened. The room went very quiet. Marcus's jaw tightened. Juliana's face paled slightly. I don't know what you're implying, she said carefully. I smiled. Don't you? Dean reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Before we go any further, I'd like to enter into evidence some additional documentation. Werner frowned. What kind of documentation? Security footage from Seattle General Hospital, maternity ward, dated April 23rd, 20 years ago. Timestamp, 2:47 a.m. I watched the color drain from Juliana's face. Marcus went very still. That's impossible, Juliana whispered. The hospital said the tapes were destroyed after 7 years. The digital archive was destroyed, Dean corrected, but I had physical copies made 20 years ago at Ms. Vance's request and stored in a secure facility. Would you like to watch it? No, Marcus said quickly. That's not necessary. Oh, I think it is, I said, my voice hardening. Dean, please. He set up the laptop, and the grainy footage began to play. There she was, Juliana, in scrubs and a surgical cap, slipping through the nursery door. The timestamp was clear. The actions were clear. The swap was documented in excruciating detail. When it finished, silence filled the room like a held breath. "You knew," Juliana finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew the whole time." "I watched you do it," I confirmed. "I saw you swap those babies. And then I walked into that nursery 2 hours later and switched them back." Marcus's face went from white to red. "That's impossible. We tested, we had DNA confirmation. From the babies you thought you'd switched," I finished. "But you didn't account for me being awake, watching, fixing your mistake." The truth was crashing down on them now, brick by brick. I could see it in their eyes, the dawning horror, the desperate calculation. "So for 20 years, Juliana said slowly, we've been raising your own daughter," I confirmed. "Chloe is yours. Biologically, genetically, legally. She always has been. And Alara is mine. The girl you've been grooming, showering with gifts, trying to turn against me. She's my biological daughter. She always has been." Marcus shot to his feet. "You let us believe for 20 years. You let us treat your own child like garbage?" I finished coldly. "Yes, I did. I watched you criticize her, demean her, destroy her self-confidence. I watched you try to break her spirit because you thought she was mine, and every single moment of that cruelty is now going to come back to you." "This is insane," Werner interjected. "My clients have DNA evidence." "Which proves exactly what I just told you," Dean interrupted. "That Chloe Rhodes is the biological daughter of Juliana and Marcus Rhodes. Which means every ounce of psychological abuse they've inflicted on that girl for the past 20 years has been directed at their own child." "You're lying," Juliana said desperately. "The DNA from the hospital records was collected after I switched the babies back," I said calmly. "All official medical records show that Alara Vance is my daughter and Chloe Rhodes is yours. Because that's the truth. The only lie was the one you tried to create." I pulled out my own folder, much thicker than theirs. "Dean, if you would." He began laying out documents, photographs of the hospital nursery, time-stamped and dated, medical records showing genetic markers, DNA tests I'd had done years ago, stored with timestamps proving they predated theirs. Most damning of all, audio recordings. "What is this?" Marcus demanded. "The conversation I overheard 3 weeks before Alara was born," I said quietly. "In your study, Marcus. Where you laid out your entire plan. Baby switch. 20-year wait. Steal my company through fraudulent DNA evidence." I pressed play. Their voices filled the room, tinny but clear. Discussing the swap, the timeline, their scheme to destroy me. When it finished, Juliana was crying silently. Marcus looked like he might be sick. "For 20 years, I said, my voice like ice. "I've watched you execute this plan. I've documented every step, every cruel word to Chloe, every manipulative gift to Alara, every move you made to position yourselves to steal my company. And I let you do it because I knew that this moment, this exact moment, would destroy you more completely than any early intervention ever could." "You're a monster," Juliana whispered. I laughed, the sound harsh in the silent room. "I'm a monster? I'm not the one who planned to steal someone's baby and their life's work. I'm not the one who spent 20 years psychologically abusing my own child because I thought she belonged to someone I hated." "We didn't know," Marcus said desperately. "We thought. You thought Chloe was mine," I finished. "Which means every cruel word, every dismissal, every moment you made her feel worthless, you did that believing she was the child of a woman you wanted to destroy. You tortured an innocent girl as a proxy for your hatred of me. The only difference is that girl happened to be your own daughter. We want custody," Marcus suddenly declared, "of Alara. She's our biological—" "Alara is 20 years old," Dean cut in. "She's a legal adult. Custody is not a factor. And even if it were, I have 20 years of documented parenting by Miss Vance, including financial records, medical records, school involvement, and emotional support. Compared to your recorded attempts at manipulation and your documented abuse of your actual biological daughter, I don't think any court would be sympathetic to your position. Werner was frantically taking notes, but even he looked shaken. Miss Vance, what do you want from my clients? I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. What do I want? I want them to understand what they've done. I want them to look at their daughter, their real daughter, Chloe, and realize they've spent 20 years destroying a beautiful, talented, kind young woman because of their own greed and hatred. We didn't know, Juliana said again, her voice breaking. If we'd known she was ours, you would have treated her differently? I asked sharply. You would have loved her because she had your DNA? That's what this comes down to? Not her worth as a person, not her character or her kindness, but whether she carried your genetic material? Juliana opened her mouth, then closed it, tears streaming down her face. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice cold and clear. You're going to go home tonight and tell Chloe the truth. All of it. You're going to explain that she is your biological daughter, that you've known or believed she wasn't for 20 years, and that's why you treated her the way you did. You're going to own every cruel word, every dismissal, every moment you made her feel worthless. You can't force us to. Marcus started. I can release this footage to the media. I interrupted. I can release the audio of your plan. I can release 20 years of documented abuse toward your own child. I can make sure everyone in Seattle knows exactly what you are. Or you can tell her yourself and try to salvage whatever relationship might be possible. That's blackmail, Werner protested. That's accountability, Dean corrected. My client is offering them a chance to confess privately before the evidence becomes public record in the lawsuit we're filing. Lawsuit? Marcus's face went from red to purple. For attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit identity theft, attempted theft of business assets, and emotional damages, Dean listed calmly. We're seeking full restitution plus punitive damages. The amount is substantial. I pulled out one more document and slid it across the table. However, I'm willing to offer an alternative. They stared at the paper like it was a snake. What is this? Werner asked, picking it up. A settlement agreement, I said. You sign over any and all claims to the Vance Group or its assets. You publicly acknowledge that Chloe Rhodes is your biological daughter and that you have no legal or emotional claim to Alara Vance. You agree to attend family therapy with Chloe for a minimum of 2 years, paid for by your rapidly depleting assets. And you stay out of my life and my daughter's life forever. And if we don't sign? Marcus asked through gritted teeth. Then I go public with everything. The media will have a field day. Wealthy couple plots to steal friend's baby and business, accidentally abuse own child for 20 years. I can see the headlines now. Your investment fund, what's left of it, will be finished. Your reputation will be destroyed. And you'll still lose any claim to my company because the evidence is ironclad. Juliana was shaking, mascara running down her face. How could you let this happen? How could you watch us? How could I? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. You tried to steal my child. You planned to gaslight me for 20 years and then destroy me. You treated an innocent girl, your own daughter, like trash because you thought she was connected to me. Every bit of this pain, Juliana, you brought on yourself. Marcus grabbed the pen. Where do we sign? The days following the boardroom confrontation were both chaotic and strangely calm. I'd been carrying the weight of that secret for 20 years, and suddenly it was gone, lifted, leaving me lighter than I'd felt since I was 25. But the hardest part was still ahead, telling the girls. I invited Ilara to lunch 2 days later, just the two of us at our favorite cafe overlooking Elliott Bay. She arrived excited, chattering about her thesis project, a sustainable housing design that was already attracting attention from local developers. Mom, you seem weird, she said finally, studying my face. What's wrong? I took a breath. There's something I need to tell you. Something that happened 20 years ago that's going to sound impossible. She set down her fork, suddenly serious. Okay, you're scaring me. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, Juliana's switch, my counter switch, the 20-year wait. I showed her the documents, played her the audio recordings, laid out the entire conspiracy. She sat in silence for a long moment after I finished, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally settling on something like awe. So Uncle Marcus and Aunt Juliana tried to steal you from me, she said slowly. And you knew the whole time. You protected me while watching them abuse Chloe, knowing she was actually their daughter. Yes, I said quietly. And I know that was a terrible thing to allow. I've struggled with it every day for 20 years. Why didn't you just expose them right away? Because I wouldn't have been able to prove it. They had money, lawyers, connections. They'd already planted seeds that I was mentally unstable. If I'd come forward immediately, it would have been my word against theirs, and I might have lost you in the legal battle. Ilara processed this, her brilliant mind working through the implications. So you let them think they'd won. You let them execute their plan, knowing you'd switch the babies back. You spent 20 years collecting evidence. Yes, that's... She paused, then laughed, a sharp, surprised sound. That's incredibly badass, Mom. I blinked. That's your reaction. They tried to destroy you and steal your company. You turned their own plan against them and made them abuse their own daughter while thinking they were winning. It's savage, but... She shook her head, smiling slightly. I mean, they literally tried to kidnap me as a baby. They've been manipulating me my whole life, trying to turn me against you. And now they've lost everything. How do you feel about Chloe? I asked carefully. Knowing she's actually their biological daughter? Ilara's face softened. I feel terrible for her. God, Mom, the way they treated her. And she was theirs the whole time. She looked at me, eyes fierce. We have to help her. She's going to need support when they tell her the truth. I know, I said quietly. I've already spoken to a therapist who specializes in family trauma. I'm prepared to pay for Chloe's therapy for as long as she needs it. Good, Ilara said firmly. And I want to keep being her friend, her sister, kind of, whatever she needs. My heart swelled. You're a remarkable person, Ilara. I learned from the best, she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. You protected me. You built an empire while carrying this secret. You waited 20 years for the perfect moment to take them down. You're my hero, Mom. I felt tears prick my eyes. I love you so much. I love you too, and those people will never take you from me. The conversation with Chloe was harder. Juliana and Marcus had called her to their house, and according to the report I received from the therapist I'd asked to be present, it went exactly as badly as expected. Juliana had broken down crying immediately, barely able to get the words out. Marcus had been defensive, angry, trying to justify their actions. Chloe had sat in shock, processing the revelation that her parents' cruelty had been based on a lie but that they'd still chosen cruelty over kindness toward a child they thought wasn't theirs. So you abused me because you thought I was someone else's daughter? Chloe had asked, her voice hollow. You spent my entire life making me feel worthless because you hated the person you thought was my mother? They'd had no good answer. 3 days later, Chloe called me. Miss Vance? Can I come talk to you? Of course, I said immediately. Anytime. She arrived at my house an hour later, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale. I made tea and we sat in my living room, the space I'd carefully created to feel safe and warm. They told me everything, she said quietly. About the plan, the switch, what you did. And I don't know how to feel. That's completely understandable, I said gently. This is a lot to process. They spent my whole life treating me like I was defective, she continued, her voice shaking. They made me feel like nothing I did was ever good enough. And it was because they thought I was your daughter. Because they hated you so much they couldn't even be kind to a child they thought was connected to you. I reached out and took her hand. That was never your fault, Chloe. Never. You were a beautiful, brilliant child who deserved love and support. The fact that they couldn't give you that says everything about them and nothing about you. But they're my parents, she whispered. My biological parents. Doesn't that mean something? It means you share DNA, I said carefully. But parents aren't just genetics. Parents are the people who show up, who support you, who love you unconditionally. They failed at that. But you didn't fail. You survived it and became an incredible person despite their cruelty. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I can forgive them. I don't know if I want to. You don't have to decide that now, I told her. Or ever. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. What matters is that you take care of yourself, process this trauma, and build a life that makes you happy. She hesitated. Can I still be friends with Alara? Even though she's not actually We're not actually. Ilara already told me she considers you her sister, I said firmly. No matter what the DNA says, you've been sisters in all the ways that matter since you were kids. That doesn't change. Chloe sobbed then, the kind of deep, wrenching cries that come from years of pain finally being released. I held her while she cried. This beautiful girl who'd been caught in the crossfire of her parents' hatred, and I felt the weight of my own choices settle heavy on my shoulders. I'd protected my daughter, yes. I'd brought down the people who tried to destroy me, but I'd also allowed Chloe to suffer for 20 years as part of that revenge. The ethics were murky, complicated, painful. I'm so sorry, I whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry I didn't stop it sooner. You didn't know they'd treat me so badly, she said, pulling back to look at me. You didn't make them be cruel. They chose that. But I could have intervened. And they would have won, she interrupted. If you'd exposed them early, they would have gotten lawyers, fought you in court. Maybe taken Alara. You did what you had to do to protect your daughter. I understand that. You're very generous, I said quietly. No, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm just tired of letting their poison control my life. They don't get to define me anymore. Not their cruelty, not their expectations, not their genes. I get to decide who I am. I smiled through my own tears. You're absolutely right. Marcus and Juliana signed the settlement agreement, but that didn't mean the consequences ended there. The story was too big, too dramatic to stay private. Within 2 weeks, a local journalist who'd been investigating Marcus's failed investment fund somehow got wind of the baby switch story. While the settlement included non-disclosure agreements, it didn't cover the public record evidence I'd already filed with the court for the initial fraud lawsuit. The article broke on a Sunday morning. Seattle power couple's 20-year con, baby switch, business theft, and accidental abuse of their own daughter. It went viral within hours. My phone rang off the hook. Reporters, old friends, colleagues, everyone wanting to know if it was true. I released a single statement through Dean. The Vance Group confirms that legal action was taken against former associates who attempted to defraud the company. The matter has been settled privately. We have no further comment and request privacy for all family members involved. But that didn't stop the media frenzy. Juliana and Marcus's faces were plastered across news sites, their investment fund hemorrhaging the last of its clients, their social circle evaporating overnight. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Ilara, however, had a different reaction. She gave one interview to a respected investigative journalist, telling the story from her perspective. She talked about growing up unaware of the manipulation, about her friendship with Chloe, about her pride in my strength and strategic patience. My mother protected me from people who tried to steal my identity and her life's work, she said in the interview. She did what she had to do to keep us safe. And I'm grateful every day that she was strong enough and smart enough to play the long game. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. She taught me that patience and planning are the most powerful weapons we have. The article ended with a photo of the two of us at a Vance Group event, standing in front of one of my buildings, both of us smiling. The caption read, Architect Serena Vance and daughter Ilara Vance, the empire that couldn't be stolen. Chloe also gave a statement, brief but powerful. I'm learning that biology doesn't determine worth. The cruelty I experienced was never about me, it was about my biological parents' inability to see value in anyone they couldn't control. I'm building a new life now, surrounded by people who actually care about me. That's all I want to say. Marcus and Juliana tried to give their own interviews, attempting damage control, but it only made things worse. Marcus came across as defensive and entitled. Juliana broke down crying on camera, which might have garnered sympathy if the full audio of their original plot hadn't also leaked somehow. Hearing them coldly plan to steal a baby and destroy a woman's life made any tears she shed look like manipulation rather than remorse. Their investment fund declared bankruptcy within a month. They had to sell their waterfront home. Marcus took a position at a mid-level firm in Spokane, a humiliating demotion for someone who'd once been a rising star. Juliana couldn't find work anywhere in Seattle's social circles. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I mostly felt empty. 20 years of my life had been shaped by their betrayal and my response to it. Now that it was over, I had to figure out who I was without that weight. 6 months after the truth came out, I stood in my office looking out at the Seattle skyline. The Vance Group had survived the scandal. In fact, we'd gained clients, with many praising my resilience and strategic mind. Elara was thriving in her final year of architecture school. Chloe was in therapy and starting to rebuild her life, working as a graphic designer for a nonprofit. Dean walked into my office carrying a folder. The final paperwork from the road settlement. They've made the last payment. It's done. I took the folder, feeling its weight. Done, I echoed. How do you feel? He asked. Honestly, I don't know. I set the folder on my desk. I spent 20 years planning for that moment in the boardroom. Now that it's over, I keep thinking about all the things I could have done differently. Like what? Like maybe I could have found a way to protect Chloe while still protecting Elara. Maybe I could have exposed them sooner. Maybe you did the best you could with an impossible situation. Dean interrupted gently. You were 25 years old, fresh from surgery, facing 2 people who'd planned to destroy you. You made a choice that protected your daughter and ultimately brought them to justice. That's not nothing. I let Chloe suffer. They made Chloe suffer, he corrected. You documented it. And now she has evidence for her own legal action if she chooses to pursue it. You also set up a trust fund for her therapy and education, which she didn't have to accept but did. You're helping her now. I sighed. I just keep thinking about all those years, all that time. You can't get time back, Dean said, but you can decide what to do with the time ahead. The question is, now that you've won, what do you want to do next? I thought about that for a long time after he left. What did I want? The answer came slowly, crystallizing over weeks of reflection. I wanted to build something new. Not just buildings, but opportunities. I wanted to create something that would help other women who'd been betrayed, manipulated, or underestimated. I established the Elara Foundation, named after my daughter, focused on supporting women in architecture and business who'd faced systematic discrimination or betrayal. We provided mentorship, legal resources, and seed funding. The first year, we helped 12 women launch their own firms or escape predatory business partnerships. Chloe joined the foundation as a designer, creating our branding and marketing materials. Working together, watching her confidence grow, felt like a small redemption for the years she'd suffered. Elara graduated with top honors and joined the Vance Group, but in her own right, not as an heir, but as a talented architect who earned her position. We worked on projects together, her fresh perspectives challenging my established methods in the best way. And slowly, carefully, I started dating again. I'd been so consumed by the secret, by the waiting, that I'd let my personal life wither. Now, at 45, I was learning to let someone in again, to trust again. It was terrifying, but it was also hopeful. 3 years after the truth came out, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Juliana. The handwriting was shaky, the paper cheap. She and Marcus had divorced. I'd heard through the grapevine. She was living in a small apartment in Spokane, working as an administrative assistant. Dear Serena, it began. I know I have no right to contact you. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to try to say this. I'm sorry, not the performative sorry I gave in the courtroom, but real, bone-deep sorry. I destroyed my own daughter's childhood because of greed and jealousy. I tried to destroy you because I couldn't stand that you succeeded where I felt I'd failed. I let my infertility and my husband's ambition turn me into a monster. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm in therapy now, real therapy, trying to understand how I became someone capable of such cruelty. Chloe won't speak to me. I don't blame her. But I wanted you to know that I see now what I did. I see the full scope of it. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be someone different, even though I know it's too late. I hope you and Elara are happy. You deserved happiness. You always did. I'm sorry I tried to take it from you. Juliana. I read the letter 3 times, feeling a complicated swirl of emotions. Anger, yes. Bitterness. But also something softer, pity, maybe. Or just exhaustion at holding on to hate. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I filed it with all the other documents from those 20 years. A final piece of the story. Because that's what it was now. A story. Not my whole life, not my defining moment, just a chapter that had closed. I had Alara, brilliant and kind and fierce. I had a company I'd built and protected. I had Chloe, who'd become like a second daughter despite everything. I had the Alara Foundation, helping women find their own paths to justice and success. And I had myself scarred, yes, but stronger, wiser, less trusting, maybe, but more aware of my own resilience. Some people might say I should have exposed Juliana and Marcus immediately, that letting Chloe suffer was unforgivable. Others might say I did what I had to do to protect my daughter. The truth is, it's complicated. Morality isn't always clean or simple. Sometimes, you make impossible choices and live with the consequences. But here's what I know for certain. They tried to steal my baby, my business, and my future. They planned for 20 years to destroy me. And instead, they destroyed themselves. That's not revenge. That's justice. And sometimes, justice takes patience. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to play the long game against people who underestimated you, let me know in the comments. And if you believe that strategic patience is the most powerful weapon we have, subscribe to Minister of Revenge. Because the best revenge isn't loud or quick. It's watching karma work while you build something they can never take away.